Healing is possible. This is Personal Transformation with Stuart Thompson. Welcome to my second edition of Personal Transformation. I'm excited here today because I have the founder of the Gatehouse, Arthur Lockhart. Before we get into the episode, I want to put out a disclaimer that this podcast is meant to be a platform to share my own personal experiences. It is not a substitute for professional support. If you are struggling with mental health and seek professional support or experiencing suicidal ideation or thoughts, please call 988. I get that right once yet. Excited. I am here today. I have Arthur Lockhart beside me as he's our first guest speaker, Personal Transformation Podcast reboot, if I guess we can call it that, because I think I did my last episode would have been about a year ago, approximately, and I've been so busy. It's a long story. I'll get into it later on. Nevertheless, anyway, Art, sitting beside me here is executive director, or let me say that again. He was a retired professor of Humber College, School of Social Community Services over the past years. Arthur has also held the position of chair of the School of Social Community Services, as well as the chair of board of directors of the Gatehouse. Arthur is the founder, or Emeritus, award-winning charitable organizer to the Gatehouse, and the co-founder of the Center for Transformative Social Change. And just last year, Art was just appointed the Order of Ontario. Again, congratulations, Art.
Thank you, Stuart.
And again, thank you for having me here today, and congratulations on the appointment. So, this is kind of a warm-up for me and for you, but I must point out, folks, that people don't understand that when I just started doing this 10 years ago, Art was my very first guest on personal transformation.
Yeah.
And I must point that out. And over the past 10 years, it's been rather exciting how this has evolved. And, and I will say this quickly, I honestly believed this was just me being my voice, and I did not realize it would turn out to be like it has. So, and I'm ever so grateful for that, such as an example, most of my recordings of my podcast in the past now are not just for people to listen to about childhood sexual abuse, but we've got all kinds of episodes where we've got clinicians coming in, we have other survivors coming in, talking about their experiences and what they've done to, how they've coped and how they've moved on, like I have, like this podcast. And that I'm so grateful for. But folks, if you want to look at personal transformation, you'll go back and you see, if you look on the page, you will see that we probably have, I think there's 230 some odd, or 230 or 250 episodes of personal transformation on there.
Fantastic.
Although we are missing a bunch of them that are not there. So in retrospect, or reality, is I've actually done over 300. So I've got 300 plus hours doing this.
Wow.
And again, enough boasting about me.
No.
I'm going to move on. I just wanted to point out about that, and I'll talk more. You'll hear more about that from my first episode in regards to how we've evolved. But I just wanted to throw that in there. But my first care, though, is Art. Thank you for being here. Now, I guess you're going on 26 years here now, and a lot has happened to you over the last years in regards to not only just getting the place open, but how do you take the involvement that has taken place at the Gatehouse from 1998 to 2024? Well, what's your perspective on how it's grown to where it is today?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Stuart, for being on the planet, for all that you do. It is remarkable. And I would say that what is the perspective of the last 26 years is, you've already enunciated on it, is voice. That people's voices are being heard. And then when they are being heard, there's action that comes out of it. That there's, and you have said this many, many times in the time that we've known one another, there's a connection that happens with people. So in the past 26 years, there have been people coming out of extreme isolation. They take the courage and the strength to come up those 5 stairs into the Gatehouse. They meet people who have also gone through traumatic events. And when they get together, there's this bonding that happens. And it's done in such a way that it invites people to then turn and reach back to someone else and say, come on aboard, this can be of help to you. And that's a heck of a gift to for what you and everybody at the Gatehouse, the person behind the camera right now, Jasmine, is a gift to the planet in terms of being willing to say, I want to give my time, I want to create my purpose in such a way that someone who's having the worst moment of their life will find a place to come to get support and get strong again. So that's kind of what's in my head at the what in answer to your question right now.
Thank you. You know, to add more to it, when I talk about evolvement over the years, so so what's your thoughts behind how we evolved in regards to the programs?
Okay.
Because the programs have evolved immensely over the years, as you know, from the day you started, like as the example you said, well, we can't have men and women together in the same house. To we have men and women in the same house as an investigation center for children to come in to give their dispositions for court. So all kinds of things I would imagine have happened. But what about the overall programs that we have laid out for the participants to come in the house? What's your thought process behind that? How that's evolved?
I think that's a really fantastic question to explore. So if I can take us back 27 years in terms of that 1 year bringing people together and planning and how we're going to put this all together. At that point, 27 years ago, the focus as we began the building, creating the Gatehouse, was on a place for children to come to be able to tell their story in a safe home setting other than going to a militarized kind of setting such as a police division. And the police supported that idea of having the investigations taking place here, as did representatives from Sick Kids Hospital, school boards, counseling organizations. So that was the focus, children. And that we were going to then do the interview here, and we were going to record the interview, and that process was unique too, because that interview tape could be entered as evidence in the court procedure, and rather than having a child go through another arduous process in the court. So that was the main focus at the time, along with rebuilding this 100-year-old home. The first home ever done like this in Ontario, in Canada, really, in terms of the programs that we're wanting to get started. So we created that space here. The police, the Children's Aid would come, they would do the investigation with the children here at the house and record it, and that would be brought to court. As we were doing that, I also said there ought to be a program for males who have been sexually abused. And the response at that time was no. We don't want to have males in the house. And I think that kind of response was 27 years ago, how people, and I think people to this day, view the issue of childhood sexual abuse. Somehow it's in the domain of males that are doing all these things. And we can talk about percentages and so on and so forth, but there seems to be an attitude that men get over it and move on. But I chose not to listen to that, and I said, no, we're going to do it. So we created the first adult male program, peer facilitated adult program in the country. There was another program that was beginning in Ottawa, which was really great under the leadership of Rick Goodwin, which is absolutely fantastic. So we began that here in Toronto. What then happened from that was the very first time in Canadian history where we made a film of the men in the program talking about what it meant to have this kind of support and process. In that film they had photographs of themselves when they were children. we put that film together. It's on the Gatehouse website. It coincided with one of the first ever conferences to take place in Canada for victims of childhood sexual abuse. Men, women, all came to this conference. We were lucky enough, the timing was such that had the film completed, showed it at the conference. There was a couple of hundred people in the room. When the film ended, there was silence in the room. Absolute silence. And then what started to happen was this. And eventually that single hand clapping erupted into people standing up and giving the film an ovation. And the men that were in the film were there to talk about it. I'm telling that story because the hand clapping for me is a metaphor. That the sound reverberated through the walls of that building and went out and wrapped around people who have been harmed as children. That's what I think happened that day. What then happened is people said to me, well, what about a program for women who have been sexually harmed? So the response was a similar response where people said, well, you can't have men and women in the house at the same time. So I said, well, okay, so we'll have men on one night and women on the other night. So we did. And that evolved, it just exploded in terms of numbers. Mm-hmm. Then what happened is my suggestion was let's have men and women together talking, having a program, 15-week program for that. And that was under the banner of Forging Individual Transformation. So we did the first ever, you were involved in that very one, and that went really well. And still to this day, goes on. What then happened after that was discussion about couples coming together where one has been harmed as a child and what's the implication for their marriage and their relationship. So we created that program. So that is going on. Then we also created the program or the process, extended the process of investigations and support for children and their families, where now Children's Aid Society comes to the Gatehouse once a week, I think it is, mm-hmm. and they do
actually twice a week.
Twice a week. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That a large organization such as Children's Aid is coming to the Gatehouse. That is remarkable.
For visitations.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. It's fantastic. Then what has happened from all of those programs, we have now had people come to the Gatehouse from, I'll just name some of the places on the planet: Bolivia, Australia, Ireland, the United Kingdom, we by way of Zoom, Scotland, Germany, Japan, and across Canada. And they've come to the house to ask us, how do you do what you do? So they meet you, they may meet Jasmine, and people here tell them, this is the process that we go through. We have even traveled to Bolivia to train the people down there in an amazing organization called Breeze of Hope. Incredible organization. And most recently through the International Society for the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect, very large organization, invited us to speak at their most recent international conference about what we do here. And that took place in Scotland, and that went extremely well, and people wanted to find out more about what's happening in the Gatehouse. So now we have, on a consistent basis, dialogue, collaboration with people and organizations from around the world. That is really quite extraordinary. And I think the number is, I'm not completely sure of this, but over 20,000 people of thereabouts have been impacted by the Gatehouse in its operation these 26 years. So that's pretty remarkable to see those kinds of programmings unfold. And now we're looking at another program for mental health for young adults and teenagers. And I'm sure we're going to be successful in that. So I think what it all speaks to is something that we don't like to say out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Childhood sexual abuse is an epidemic on the planet. And we just don't give it the time that we might give other issues. And I'm not trying to be comparing, but I'm just saying it seems to me that the minute you, if we're talking about real tragic scenarios of suicide or homelessness, these are all really important, profound issues. If we now, the minute we start saying sexual abuse, my experience has been people kind of back up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There's many reasons for that, but my thinking is the kids that are living on the streets, if you ask them, and I spent time taking people with me on the streets, that was to find out who's out there. Overwhelmingly, the statements that all the people came back, we did this for about 4 years, we wrote a book about it called Community Lost and Found. What happened, the students found out that the majority of people living on the streets found it safer than their own house. And
we still hear that today.
Isn't that something,
yeah,
Stuart?
We still hear that today.
Yeah. So what is it in our culture that has this situation unfolding, that people are being harmed by people they know? Yes, there are predators, and I'm using that term in quotes, online predators taking place. That is all happening. There's no doubt about that, and that needs to be dealt with. But in the main, more often than not, people are being sexually harmed by people they know, close family friends or family members. So what is it in our culture that has that happening? That's what I think we need to explore and address. And I can make, if you want, I'll say some thoughts about that, like why I think that is and what we can do.
Go ahead.
So one of the things I think that's happened in our culture is that children are seen as possessions of a family. And is a possession of a family, they are directed to behave a certain way. So and we do these things without even thinking about it. We put children on the laps of strangers and say, just go and be with that person. We don't, we have children's going up to different settings with people they don't really know, and almost an act of intimacy where somebody puts their arms around them and so on. And that's not wrong in a way, but what can also happen when that same act of intimacy isn't healthy, it's unhealthy, the child doesn't know what to do. And something happens, and then we're told, obey your elders. So the child's confused about, I'm supposed to obey this adult that's harming me, and so they don't know what to do. My experience in talking with adults who have gone through that, and I'm talking now not only 26 years at the Gatehouse, but another 20 years in the criminal justice and educational justice field, that you freeze. You don't know what to say, what to do. It's very confusing because also you feel you have done something wrong. It's your fault that this is happening. And you don't want to have somebody else getting into trouble. Because we tell our children, do you want anybody to get in any trouble? And so there's that kind of element that's there. So then when we do investigate it, it is in a retributive response. The child is now the victim, which in the courts system is a source of information to get the bad person, the perpetrator. So the child has to articulate all of this information about what's happened to them. And that's really complicated, really conflictual. I think that if we were to have not so much this language around child protection, where we're going to protect the child, but child empowerment, where we're going to have the child stronger than they've ever been before. And we do that through educational programs in schools which do not exist in our country, so that they feel safe and comfortable, and says that when something isn't going right, they're okay with saying, hey, wait a minute, this isn't good, stop it, or go to the adult that they do trust and love and care, or cared for, and tell them this happened. Overwhelmingly, my experience once again is that the incredible, I don't think to this very day we can really measure it, the weight of it, the shame and guilt and fear that a child carries when they've been sexually harmed is enormous. And we kind of respond to that by just saying, we're going to get the person who harmed you, rather than maybe slowing it down and saying, yes, we're going to attend to that for sure. But how do we be with a child as a whole person, not as a victim, but as a young human being who's had something really horrible happen to them, in such a way that they'll feel comfortable to talk about it? That's why we created the room upstairs. And I think we have to keep that at the forefront. I can tell you a story about trying to give a concrete example of this, if I may.
Sure, yeah.
So I would do talks consistently at the Elmore Police College, and it was for people the police officers who do childhood sexual abuse investigations. And this is going back decades now. One officer, after I was doing my talk, just about finished my talk, he told me a story. And he said, everything you said just hit me pretty hard. He said, I've been doing investigations of child abuse for some number of years now. He's walking out of a house with a child. Back then, at this particular case, they showed up at the house. Child's out, and the officer's holding the child's hand, and the child freezes and doesn't want to move. The officer's confounded. Why isn't the child wanting, to move? So I would ask all the officers that were there, what do you think? Like, why would the child freeze? And people would say, well, he's being taken from home, or doesn't know what's going to happen next, and so on. And that makes sense. That would be part of the answer, I'm sure. And then I said, where are you going? And the officer goes, to the police division. And I said, and what, you have a car? And he said, yeah, we had the cruiser there. And I said, from a child's perspective, who gets in the back of a cruiser? Bad people get in the cruiser. And where do you take bad people? To jail. And back then, people weren't being investigated. There would be investigations taking place in different settings like that. So my thinking, that was part of my motivation about having a place in the community that was safe for people to come, and the police to come here with the social workers in a setting that was conducive to what does a child feel safe in, or even an adult sitting in a room, as opposed to going to the police station. And I think that really enhances the work of the police to also make it safe to know, let the child, that they haven't done anything wrong, or the adult finally comes forward and says, I can't handle it anymore. I need to talk. And so my experience has also been that people, all the adults I've ever spoken to, I would say 90% maybe, have said to me two things that they wanted to have happen. They wanted the abuse to stop when they were a kid, and they didn't want anybody else to be harmed. That's what they said to me. So how then do we attend to that in a way that creates genuine transformative social change? We have to really slow things down and look at our culture and say, what are we doing that perpetuates the problem? Because it still exists. I mean, it's the predators in terms of online predating, predators, it's quite significant. So, and the kids still aren't telling anybody. What do we need to do? We have to find ways that educate our children. We teach our children well, so that they can come forward and say this is happening. We have to work on that. But if we keep coming at it retributively, we just promote in so many ways more fear. Mm-hmm. That's been my experience. I don't know, Stuart, if I'm making sense here.
Yeah.
Does it?
Yeah, you're absolutely making absolute sense. And I mean, and here at the Gatehouse, we see this all the time, right? I mean, we're looking for change, but it's not there. It's stagnant.
Absolutely.
Very much stagnant, and obviously hoping into the future that this does get better. But I do have hope that it does. But it's people like yourself and us here at the Gatehouse and other organizations throughout the world. They're trying to change that.
Well, one of the things that we did and do here is look into the realm of restorative justice. Mm-hmm. And years ago, I co-authored a book on that called Restorative Justice, Transforming Society. And what it is about is bringing people together in circles to resolve the harm that has happened to somebody, mm-hmm. and to find a way for the person to help repair the harm, the person who caused the harm in the first place. So that's one of the things I think we need to look into very calmly, gently, mm-hmm. but we can do something in that realm. If I could give an example.
Sure.
A child who's been sexually harmed by a family member is an example. Now, yes, people can go to courts and people can be charged, convicted, and go into custody. But what about if we did say we want the behavior to stop with this person who's done the harmful behavior, but we do it in such a way that they also get help so that they're not going to do this behavior anymore, without going through another process of custody, criminal records, and so on. Is that possible? I know this can sound really inflammatory for people. And how do you sit in a circle and have people talk about the harm that has happened to them? So you would have, let's say it's an older brother who's harmed a younger brother, as just an example. Mm-hmm. Does it make sense for that child to go off to jail for young people? Does that make sense? Or is there another way that we can approach that? Because once again, we do know that overwhelmingly the people who do these harmful things are within the family network or mm-hmm. connected to the family network.
80-90% of them are.
Yeah, so if we could do that, that could be really transformative, because what we would learn from that are so many things where the person who did these harmful things is able to say what was happening for them at the time, mm-hmm. that they were engaging in these things. Mm-hmm. In a court of law, it's a very different adversarial position where people are told what to say, how to say. All of this stuff is already, the answers are there before they even get the question. And I'm not trying to make the criminal justice system bad, but I'm simply saying, is there more that we can explore in this realm? For example, our next conference, international conference, is May 15th.
Yeah.
And one of the speakers we have is a woman who had been raped by a person. And she advocated on her behalf to have a restorative justice circle in that setting. And that had all kinds of waves run. How can you do that, and so on and so forth.
If I may, I met this woman with Maria.
Okay.
And Karen. We were at a Gluckstein webinar.
Yeah.
And we met this woman there.
Okay.
So I love it that she's actually going to be taking part in a conference to talk about this experience, because when we talk about restorative justice, I'm really glad you're talking about this, because it can go one way or the other way, and obviously it's not for everybody, but I think it's definitely something that should be looked at a lot deeper, because obviously the justice system's not fixing the problem, and again, that's another topic all in itself. But
Yeah.
just what you're saying. So yeah, I'm right on board with you.
I'm glad you're saying that, because to me, it's like helping us. If we're going to really engage in transformative social change, really authentic transformative social change, we have to look at these very difficult things and say, let's just explore the possibility of this. And it's like building a really healthy fire. I know you're an outdoors person, as am I. I go on a lot of canoe trips and whatnot. And you cannot get a good fire going by throwing a great big log on it, spray it with some oil, and light a match. But if you build it slow, and then emanates all this heat, right? And that's what I think here. When we started restorative justice training, we did the first restorative justice training in the province, that was done in the province of Ontario, the largest province, and it was similar to the Gatehouse, where people would say, "Oh, you can do restorative justice circle for somebody who stole something under $500. You can never do that." You can't do it for anything more serious than that. When we first started out, and then we did, and it was really amazing what began to happen, and people seeing people as whole people, and people coming up with new ideas about how do we respond to what is happening. And if we could do more of that, I think you end up transforming the entire, in quotes, justice system. Retributive justice doesn't get us in. I'm being really, please, if you want to be upset with me for what I'm saying, let Stuart know, and he can send me.
Let me know.
Yeah, let me know. But I think on our planet, most of the conflict is based on retribution. And we hit each other back and forth constantly. We have wars, all kinds of horrible things happening on our planet under the banner of retribution. You deserve to get hit back for what you did to me. Restorative and transformative justice says, no, we're going to deal with this very hard issue, very difficult issue, but there's a whole other way of looking at it. And the minute you do that, the aperture on your camera gets wider, right? And so I think that's the excitement of the Gatehouse here, is to be constantly engaging and exploring ideas that'll help bring a person's strength up, that you see the whole person, right? Not just the victim. Like, you think about the person's going to speak about her experiences at the conference. She's coming at it not as a victim, but as a strong, whole person, a very powerful woman, saying, these are the things that I want to see happen. If she had been framed exclusively as a victim, I don't think this would be happening. It just wouldn't be happening. So my hope is that in schools, kids learn about what sexual harm is. What does that really mean? When it feels like it's happening, what are the processes that I can do to respond to this? And I'm talking young children in elementary school can be taught. If we can teach a child, look both ways before you cross the street, because if you don't, you're going to get hit. Is there other things that we can, what's our skill set as the adults to teach the kids? What do we need to do to teach a child that kind of thing? If we do that well, those kids grow up strong in such a way that we all get stronger. But right now, I think the stats are 1 in 3 females are sexually harmed in Canada. And 1 in 6 males are sexually something.
It's one. They rated like 1 in 6, but I still think the numbers are
even higher.
I think they are higher, because the majority of the men don't come forward. And even women to a degree now, because of justice system. Right. As an example, and we here at the Gatehouse, we often get women calling in. Asking for help. Right, because they don't know where to go, and the resources are. Anyway, it's another story.
No, and just staying 2 bit for just a couple of seconds on more about the court process and the retributive process, that again, in the 26 years that I've been connected to the Gatehouse, one of the most common refrains that I have listened to is people who did go through a court process. And I said, so how did that go for you? What did you feel? The word that is most often that I heard from people was they felt empty. They didn't feel that it was concluded. They didn't feel satisfied. They didn't feel like fulfilled or heard.
Yeah.
That kind of thing was always, it's ever present. And so my question is, how does that happen? What is it that a person needs to be feeling like that they're not empty? When I ask people that, they say that they want to be able to tell their story so that it won't continue this abuse. That's what they say. They don't say to me right away, I want the person to go to prison for the rest of their life. Sometimes somebody has said a couple of things like that, but in the main, they always say, I just wanted it to stop. I don't want it to happen again. That's what they talk about. So if that's the focus, and this is from thousands of people saying that, what do we do as a culture to honor those insights from the people who've been harmed? What do we do? That's what we have to ask ourselves. And I think at the Gatehouse, we are showing that we can create processes so the person's voice comes out, right? We've been there, right? We've been in the room, and the tears are coming down a person's cheeks, and they're saying, for the first time, how many times as a facilitator have you heard somebody say, this is the first time I've said this out loud?
Yes.
I never thought, or the other one is, I never thought I'd be saying this to somebody else. I mean, how many times have we heard
More
that?
More times than I can count.
Gee. And
in fact, I even heard this last night because I started a new mentoring 2 weeks ago, and I was hearing this scene just to your exact words.
And it just, and I was a probation officer for 10 years before I became a professor. And that one of my roles in probation at one point was I traveled to all the different correctional facilities in the province and probation offices. I was what was called the senior development officer. I trained people that were custody, correctional officers and probation officers. So I got to go to every facility in the province. And one of the things that I saw in my travels over the years, and this was also stated by the youth advocate at the time for the province, it didn't matter whether you went to a facility in the far reaches of Northern Ontario, Thunder Bay, Kenora, Timmins, whatever, or here in Toronto, Ottawa, it didn't matter. They're somewhere in that institution, and I bet you it's the same to this very day. You will find a sketch somewhere in the facility. You will find a sketch of a shape of a person, and they'll have the heart will be the focus of the sketch. And what you'll see, I'll guarantee it, you'll find a hole in the heart. That's what we talked about, the advocate and I, that we saw these different things and so the question is, who is that person with their hole in the heart? And I think that the people who end up in these facilities, if we rewind the tape of their childhood, I'm going to guess that they probably had introductions to the world of ultimately criminal behavior by being harmed and victimized in different ways. That's my take. And so I think what would be exciting is to engage in processes under the banner of transformative social change, and there are 3 steps to this, 3 very specific steps. And I apologize. Stuart's really got me going here. Like I'm really
It's all good.
talking a lot. If
Keep
that's
going.
okay.
Keep going. Keep going.
Okay.
I do have 2 points
Oh,
I want
okay.
to bring up once
Okay.
you're done.
All right. So okay. So in the realm of transformative social change, 3 things are essential for authentic transformative social change to happen. One begins with personal reflection, having the courage, and it takes a lot of work, as we all know from the Gatehouse, to take a look at oneself and one's life. What is my life like? Who am I? Where am I? Where am I going? Like we need to do that. Oftentimes, people, the life seems to go by so fast. The next thing you know, you're turning around, and we use language like midlife crisis and so on. Like we don't. How did I get here? And what kind of? Why is this happening to me? So personal reflection is really significant. When I do that well, it creates the opportunity for personal transformation. It doesn't mean it's automatic. It means the opportunity there is now to look at, I'm going to move in this way now. I'm going to change this part of my life. I am going to do this particular activity, even though it might be new to me or uncomfortable for me, especially talking about sexual harming. Then when I'm going through that personal transformation, it creates the opportunity to engage in social transformation. So those 3 steps are really essential to create transformative social change. And so in my own personal story, I didn't really realize, but that's the kind of stuff that I was engaging in. And I was clumsy, I was awkward, I was confused, but something kept me going on it. One of the most powerful thing that kept me going was another human being. Someone that listened to me without saying that they were going to fix me. They listened to me with unbelievable goodness and kindness. And that's what happens, I think, at the Gatehouse. People listen really well versus waiting to speak. We really listen to somebody. And in that process, what Stuart, you've said so many times, and I love when you say it, is when that listening is happening in that way, there's a connection. And you and I have seen this happen time and again. People feel,
hundreds and hundreds of times.
So isolated and alone, and they come up those 5 steps, like I mentioned, and somebody says hello, and they come into the house, and then there's this connection that happens, and that's pretty magical. So I think that feels different than, say, and I'm not trying to be hard on other organizations, but there's a different feeling going there than going up the steps of a courthouse. I've been into many courthouses as a probation officer, many. And so, or going into a facility where people are in custody. And overwhelmingly, as I said a few minutes ago, knowing that their start was when they were being harmed as kids. Is there a way that we can change that? That's what I'm excited about. And the fact that our little tiny house here has people coming from all around the world, coming in contingents of 13, 15 people coming over from Japan most recently as an example, or researchers from Australia saying, how do you guys do that stuff?
Or Ireland.
Or Ireland,
which we've had.
We just recently here and going, and saying things like, well, I never thought of some of these things that you guys are doing. So it's an honor that we're there. It's an honor to be in a room with Jasmine. It's an honor to be in a room with you, Stuart, to know that what you're doing here with this tape today is an example. That gets to be shared with many people.
The world.
Yeah, the world.
The world.
The world. And that is it's a wonderful gift, right? It is. So anyway, that's what I'm seeing.
I thank you for sharing that. But there's 2 things I want to add on to that, which is also very important. When we talk about restorative justice, but most people don't know where it evolved from.
Yes.
And I will point out that, and I'm going back a millennium. I'm talking about First Nations. there are that's where it kind of evolved from. If you look, if you Google it, that's all you got to do, and you'll find many different examples of actually different First Nations groups throughout. I'm talking throughout North America. I'm not just talking Canada, U.S. I'm talking about here in the West, and you'll find examples. And I know from my studies that we talked about this, right, about restorative justice, and thought, well, if you're here and you're in this community, and you steal something, and it affects the family, to me, it makes a lot more sense than killing that person or locking that person up. So how did that harm that family?
Yeah.
So what are we gonna do as a community now that the family's gonna be happy, and the community's gonna be happy, and you're gonna have what we call justice to whatever that might come to.
Yeah.
And I love it when I learned about that. It was just totally awesome. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Obviously, not every occasion.
Nope.
It's gonna be it's not gonna be worthwhile. And the second thing, thank you, Jasmine, for reminding me, is that is Aaron's Law, which let me rephrase that to Charmaine's Law, which we started, which Charmaine started here 10 years ago, and now which has evolved into Aaron's Law, which is in 35 states already, and has been presented in the provincial legislature. And I just wanted to throw that out there, folks. Call your local politician. What I'm getting at here is with Aaron's Law, if you don't know anything about it, it means that there'll be sexual consent talked about in the school with the kids. Just to the part that Art was talking about. We do have a 15-minute warning. I can't believe the time has gone by. To wind us down here a little bit, I want to talk briefly about you and Brad wrote a book recently. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Brad Hutchinson is a remarkable human being. He was the executive director here for a number of years. And he moved out of that role when he contracted cancer, and it was esophagus cancer, and went through some major surgery, and they told him that it's unlikely that he'll ever speak again. And from all of that, he now travels the world. We go around doing workshops. We just came back recently from Scotland doing a workshop together, and he speaks. It's incredible that he's speaking. And what he's speaking about is a book we wrote together called Forging Individual and Social Transformation. And if you want to find out more about the book, you can send a note to Stuart and or the Gatehouse, and we can get that out to you.
Happy to send it to you.
Oh, okay, great. And basically what the book is, it's about both Brad and my journey about how do you create transformation in your life? What are the things, stages, and processes that you can actually do to go through those 3 steps about understanding yourself in such a way that you do engage in personal transformation and engage in social transformation. So the book is filled with the processes that are there for people to do that kind of work. And it's exhilarating. To be able to write a book in that way, and have the feedback that we are getting about the book. And it's a kind of a book that you can read any part of it. My suggestion is from front to back, but you can start in the middle, or you can go to the latter part of the book. You can bounce around with the ideas. Some of the ideas may make you feel uncomfortable, and that's okay. We often say at the Gatehouse, when they come into the group processes, it's like if you want to get really light, you've got to go down into the really dark places. And then when you've got understanding of those dark places, then there's this lightness of being that you have. And so that's what we talk about in the book. Very specific processes. One of the most powerful, if anybody's listening and anybody is going through trauma right now, I talk about it in the book. I would say the first thing to do is to take a nice deep breath in and release it out. Just breathe in and breathe out. Just starting with the breath. When I do that, and I then take a look at what kind of trauma is going on in my life, I just take another breath in and release that breath, because I know I'm safe right wherever I'm happening to be sitting at that moment. And it's in that moment that you can make a call to a place such as the Gatehouse or wherever you happen to be living to find that connection with somebody. That all begins with, everything begins with the breath. And so we do a lot of breathing at the Gatehouse. Brad is a Shaolin Kung Fu master, and he teaches people different forms of that art form in ways that are getting people grounded. And so I do the very same thing with all of those processes that we talk about in the book. Every single day, you don't miss. And you do these different forms of activities. And we've had people going through horrific experiences and tell us when they read and did some of those activities, things began to change. And that makes you feel really good inside. You just feel like you kind of lighten up, you know? And so that's, it's a wonderful experience. And you can find out again more about Brad too by going to the Gatehouse. And I'm sure maybe there'll be a follow-up where you interview
Well, actually,
Brad.
if you go into our website, you will find the links there.
Oh, okay,
right,
wonderful.
For your book that you both have.
That would be fantastic, yeah. So we're really, really happy about it. If I can, it happened.
Both
so,
you want.
Okay, it happened. It just happened.
Yeah.
So we went and we spoke, Brad and I, at a conference with 60 countries represented, and using the concepts of our book. When the conference was over, they sent out, the international conference sent out a summary, and our session was highlighted as epitomizing what the whole conference was about. So that makes you feel pretty good inside, and people saying that this is really important work. It takes a lot of time and energy to create something like that kind of a book, but what also takes time and energy is you, anybody listening to Stuart's podcasts. The time and energy that you give to transforming the trauma that you've experienced, it's really exciting, because then as you get stronger, I mentioned earlier, you get to turn your hand over to somebody else and say, you want to join in with me? And then you gently shake somebody else's hand and say, welcome. I mean, if we did more of that, as opposed to wanting just to punish people or get angry at people, and I'm talking about people who've been sexually harmed, who've told me they were punished for being harmed, if you can believe that. That's people would tell me things like, why didn't you say something sooner? If you had said this would never have happened. All these, and that's just very surface stuff. I mean, there's so many more levels to that. So in the book, what we talk about is going into those really dark places, and how everybody has it. There's no one that doesn't have it. An energy that's filled with goodness, and then that little bubble comes back to the surface. And we use that metaphorically, and actually concretely we show how to do that in the book. And I just think if we spent more time on that in the planet, I wonder what our planet would be like. I think that would be kind of interesting if we were to do that kind of thing. So that's kind of what comes out of that book. So thanks for asking me about the book. Yeah,
you're quite welcome, because I think people need to know about that.
Yeah,
we are running on time here, unfortunately. Yeah. But I could have talked to you easily another hour, because we have a lot of things we could talk about. We didn't even talk about our SCC project as well. Another time that'll have to be. But any last words before we sign off?
To say thank you. I want to thank you for being involved in Stuart and Jasmine's podcast today. I want to thank you for being the kind of person who has the courage to say, I want to look into this a bit further. And you find Stuart. And I want to thank you, Stuart, very much. I feel like having been together, connected with you for these past years, it really is an honor and a privilege to know you. I not just on a working relationship, right? But in the context of a friendship. I brag about you all the time.
You're gonna make me blush now.
I do. I brag about you so much, and you have brought such joy into the world that's to be really, really acknowledged. And so I'm really grateful to you, and I'm grateful to Jasmine. You can't see Jasmine because she's behind the camera right now, but her kindness kind of envelops you when you come up to the house. That's been my experience, and I'm not trying to embarrass you, but honestly, it's very kind. And so, how is it that's happening in a setting that is when you're with people who are having the worst moments of their lives?
Absolutely.
You can walk out of here after, and people are smiling. Like, how does that work, right? So. That's what I'm thrilled about. Those are my last words to this experience here today. So thank you both.
So can I ask you, when you leave here today, what are you going to do for self-care?
Oh,
friends, pay attention to this.
What I do every day, I do my meditation technique process that I've been doing since for over 60 years now. So I do that every single day. I don't miss on that. And then I do different forms of what's referred to as a keto. I do that, and then I do training, and then resistance training and so on. That's the self-care I do. But I also make a point of I've been with this person for almost 55 years, and when I go home today, I'm going to be making a point of saying how much I love her, and that maybe that's something that we can think about. Anybody listening today, that you can connect with somebody to say, I love you, or it doesn't have to be even I love you. It might just be saying, thank you for being in my life. That's my form of self-care. And it's fun because sometimes, the person looks back and says, I love you too, and you smile and you laugh, or they say, oh, don't be so silly, and that's not bad. I like that. So that's my self-care. How about your self-care?
My self-care, well, when I get finished today, I'll probably just go for a long walk and go for a really, really good day. And Jasmine, behind the camera, can we even ask you?
Oh.
I'll put you on the spot here.
I think for self-care, I am going to go home and get into bed with a really good book.
Good.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, folks, we are winding it down here. So, when we talk about self-care is all about looking after yourself, inside and out.
Yeah.
Right? Which a lot of us don't do. It means doing things that make you feel good, like exercising, eating well, chilling out, having fun. Reading a book, like Jasmine talked about.
Yeah.
It's super important because it helps you balance and deal with stress. And just generally make you feel happier and healthier. So why not just do it? Whether it's go to a gym, go for a walk, things like we're talking about.
Yeah.
Folks, we are out of time. Thank you for joining the second episode of Personal Transformation, the reconstruction as we call it. Go to thegatehouse.org and you can find lots of stuff that we've been talking about. Art's talked about restorative justice, and there's links in there to all kinds of different things that could potentially help you through the process if you are a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And we've got links to resources on there, but most of all, importantly, folks, we talk about self-care. After today, remember, take care of yourself.
Yeah.
So if you're triggered in any way, I don't think we had any really too triggering conversations, but nevertheless, think about yourself, go for a walk, eat, do the things we're talking about. And folks, thank you very much. I want to thank Jasmine behind the camera for producing Personal Transformation, and we will be back. Thank you, folks. Have a good day. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.